The Rock type. A type that is seen as a wall, as it's a type with impressive defensive stats that should allow for it to handle almost any attacks, falls victim, and contradicts itself by having one of the worst defensive properties. Alongside this, it's also powerful on the offensive end with its raw stats and type properties, but due to its moveset, it fails to fully capitalize on offense as well. So let's take a closer look at Rock, the type Unrefined by the numbers. Let's start by looking at the Rock type properties to see why it has garnished such an awful reputation. Its properties were actually pretty solid during Generation 1. It was super effective against 4 types and able to resist 4 types. Negatively, 4 types were able to deal super effective damage against them, with there also being 2 types being able to resist Rock type attacks. Now looking at this overall, the Rock type has more positive attributes than negative attributes. But if you inspect these typing closer, you find that this typing is horrible. It is weak to the most common offensive types of ground and fighting, the types who are currently tied for most amount of super effective advantages at 5, alongside being weak to water, the most commonly seen type across final stage evolutions in Kanto. This is an atrocious stat for the Rock type, as not only is it their weakness, but across final stage evolution, the Rock type ranked in second to last for lowest average special defense across all types. But this is without counting for Onix or Rhydon, since they aren't final stage Pokemon, who would have brought the averages down, while normal types such as Lickitung, Porygon, and Chansey would have brought their averages up had they been included. Anyways, this low special defense is extremely bad for the Rock type, since during generations 1 through 3, all water type attacks are labeled as being special attacks. This problem also occurs with its final weakness of Grass, where its attacks are also labeled as being special only. And although Grass isn't that powerful, it does however deal 4 times damage to 10 out of 11 Rock type Pokemon that exist in Kanto. More about the Rock type's horrid dual typing later in this video, but all we know about this type so far is that this typing is doo-doo, and it gets worse in the next generation of Johto. This generation introduced the Steel typing, a type that is slow with high defense, that is weak to the most offensive attacking types. Sounds like Rock, but unlike Rock, Steel has 10 resistances, an immunity, and less total weaknesses, pretty much replacing the entirety of the Rock type's whole concept. And if being replaced as a defensive wall wasn't enough, the Rock type also can't penetrate the Steel type, and furthermore, it is also weak to Steel type attacks, making it gain its 5th weakness, and allowing the Rock type to hold the record for most amount of weaknesses by a singular type, at 5, tied with Grass. And this is where Rock currently stands, a type that does have some flexibility on offense, but it gets overshadowed due to its lackluster defensive properties. So let's see if the strength and frequency of Rock types has been getting better over the years, so that it can make up for its already huge flaws. Just know, the following calculation is only considering regular and regional forms, not alternatives or megas. The Kanto region introduced 11 Rock type Pokemon, and compared to other regions, this was statistically their worst roster of Pokemon, as not only do over 90% of them have a 4 times weakness, but they also on average have a base stat value of 420. This is the lowest average across all rosters of Rock type Pokemon. It's not that much better in Johto. This generation gave us 7 new Rock types, with one of them being the powerful pseudo-legendary known as Tyranitar. With its help, it leads the Johto Rock types to on average have a base stat of 438, which is better than Kanto. But when looking at only final stage Pokemon, the average base stat of Rock type in Johto was 471. This is the lowest value across all regions of final stage Rock Pokemon. Then we get to Hoenn, who holds the record for most amount of Rock types introduced in a singular generation at 12. And not only did they release the most, but these Pokemon were overall fairly strong, with the average base stat among them reaching 446, the highest we've seen thus far, and doing so with the largest pool of Pokemon. We then head into Sinnoh. This generation gave us 7 Rock types, who were on average alright I guess, with them having an average base stat total of 434. We still waiting for Mega Rampardos though. Next is Unova. This region gave us 10 Rock type Pokemon, and this is the last time we see a double digit amount of Rock type Pokemon being released in a singular generation. They had 2 solid Rock type Pokemon with Terrakion and Archeops, well at least 1.5 good Pokemon. This causes their average base stat to reach 439. But more importantly, due to Archeops and Terrakion stats, the final stage Rock types of Unova had the highest average base stat total at 528. This record is tied with the next generation as well, which is Kalos, who gave us 8 Rock types. And despite this not being the most ever, due to its overall lack of Pokemon, it does allow Kalos to hold the record for largest concentration of rock-type Pokemon at 11.1%. And on average, these Pokemons were slightly stronger than those from Unova, with them having an average base stat total of 459. The rock type gets even better in the Alola region, however. In this generation, there were only 5 rock types. This allows Alola to hold the record for fewest amount of rock type Pokemon released. Luckily for them, this group was statistically the best, with them on average having a base stat value of 469, the highest across all regions. Next up is Galar. This one was kind of disappointing for the rock type, as it only gave us 6 new rock types, with them having a met average base stat of 436. And then we get to Paldea, seeing a nice chunk of 8 rock Pokemon. However, these were also kind of underwhelming compared to what is usually expected from types in Paldea, with the average base stat of the rock type being 444, which is the 3rd lowest compared to the averages of all types in Paldea. And with their help, it brings the overall average of rock type Pokemon to 441. When accounting for the 6 regional form Pokemon as well, this value does not change, which places it as being the 9th highest across all types, which puts it in the middle. When looking at just final stage Pokemon, the rock type had an average of 508, which places it in 12th, which isn't that good since it already has type property issues. But look at this particular stat. The rock type average stat in Paldea was 444, while its average stat in Hoenn was 446. This makes it the only region whose average base stat in Paldea is lower than that of Hoenn. What makes this stat so significant is that on average, in terms of all Pokemon, Hoenn had the lowest average base stat total across all regions, while Paldea had the highest across all regions, meaning that not even Power Creep was able to save this awful type from being one of the worst. To somehow make matters even worse, the rock type also has a decline in frequency, due to there being less overall Pokemon, although the amount of times the rock types are being seen has pretty much been consistent, with 7.3% of all Pokemon being associated with the rock typing back in Kanto, to now about 7.2% of Pokédex entry Pokemon having this typing. When adding the 6 regional form Pokemon as well, it makes 80 out of 1080, or 7.4% of all regular and regional form Pokemon associated with the rock typing. Whether you want to view this as good or bad, it's up to you. But what still remains is that this typing, with its awful properties and below average stats, desperately needs something for it to be useful. So looking at what it has, let's see what kind of playstyle the rock type is intended to be used as. They mainly have 2 options. That's to either be a physical wall or a physical attacker. Just look at its averages according to Pokemon database. It's not good in any other category. Now, both of these playstyle have their own flaws. For physical attacks, well, it's on average the slowest type in the entire franchise. So unless you're pairing it up with the Trick Room team, most offensive rock Pokemon have their potential completely wasted. Now, their other choice is to be physical walls, with them on average having the 2nd highest defense in the entire franchise. The problem with this is that they are 1, still vulnerable to special attacks. And 2, it has the most amount of weaknesses, which includes the type who on average has the highest attack stat, and the type that has the most powerful physical move. In fact, 3 out of the top 5 rock Pokemon with the highest defense stat have 4 times weaknesses to both fighting and ground, meaning it's not walling anything. Luckily, the rock type does have one thing that helps with its bulkiness, that being the weather condition known as Sandstorm. In this weather, Pokemon take damage at the end of the turn unless they are rock, ground, or steel typed. Alongside this, rock gets another boost that the other 2 don't see, which is a 50% increase to special defense while in Sandstorm. This makes the rock type actually somewhat usable, but it would require you to fully build a team around it. So now let's take a look at the moves this type uses. In terms of status moves, their best move is the entry hazard known as Stealth Rock. If I'm keeping it real, this is the best rock type move. Now let's look at special moves. There only exist 3, with Meteor Beam, Power Gem, and Ancient Power. Of them, the most used one is Power Gem, since it's the most common. It has 80 base power, 100 accuracy, and no secondary effect. It's not that good, but it doesn't matter, since most rock types are physical attackers anyways. So let's see what it has in store for physical moves. The most powerful rock type move with 100 accuracy that is accessible by many Pokemon is Smackdown.
What is that?
This move only has 50 base power, with a secondary effect allowing for the use of the much better move of Earthquake. At this point, the type is so that even with the help of other types, I don't think that it can be saved. But we might as well check up on the rock type dual typing. Can another type save it from its endless suffering, or will it somehow cause things to become worse? This part will be analyzed based on Wolfie's video about all type combinations. In his video, the 3 worst types that rock can be paired up with is ice, dark, and fire. These combination has been seen a total of 6 times across final stage dual type rock Pokemon, which is the expected amount. But the same can't be said with the best 3 combinations, which in Wolfie's video were rock fighting, rock fairy, and rock ghost. These combination has only been seen 3 out of 38 times across final stage dual type rock Pokemon, which means we rarely ever see them. Furthermore, the singular best rock dual typing of rock and ghost has never been used. The CEO of Game Freak must have failed his grade 3 science test about sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic rock or something. That's like the only reason they can use to explain why this type has been treated so poorly. In fact, out of the 38 final stage dual type rock Pokemon that exist, 24 of them, which is 63%, have at least one 4 times weakness. Well then, with all that being said, let's finally look at the rock type performance in a competitive aspect. Just know the following stats are from Peakalytics and was extracted on July 3rd, 2025. Pokemon usages could have increased or decreased from when you are watching this video. We start as usual with the Uber tier. Now, this might be tough for Rock to find any usage here since only Arceus Rock has ever hit the Uber tier ranking for Smogon, but we'll look at it anyways. In this format, there exists only one rock Pokemon in the top 30 for usage rate, that being Glimmora, whose sole purpose is to set up hazards and nothing else. It holds a quadruple weakness to ground, but luckily it's holding the Focus Sash item in most cases. If we extend the list to see the top 50, we also get introduced to Tyranitar and Carbink. Yet, none of these 3 Pokemon even deal stab rock damage. The highest ranked rock type that actually deals stab rock damage is the 59th ranked Garganacl with Salt Cure, which is mainly used for a secondary effect anyways. All this shows is that the rock type has no reliable attacks for it to use its offensive properties, and matched with just straight up horrid defense properties, it makes the rock type have no utilization in the strongest format of Ubers. But let's see if it can start to get used in the weaker tiers. Let's now look at OU. This format is pretty much the same situation for rock, with there only being one Pokemon in the top 30 for usage rate, which is Garganacl. Glimmora placed in 37th, but this time its moveset actually involves a rock type attack. However, the story about the rock type usages stay the same. So let's get to the bottom of this by seeing the rock type performance in the monotype format. This format involves you to create a team with all Pokemons within it sharing a common type. In this format, the rock type with the highest usage rate is the 74th ranked Cleaver. For comparison, every other type has at least one representation in the top 50 for usage rate, undeniably showing that nobody even wants to use the rock type. But we do see some slight changes when we alter battles from the singles format to the doubles format. In OU doubles, we see 2 rock type Pokemon ranked in the top 20 for usage rate, that being Glimmora that sets up hazards and Diancie, a mythical Pokemon with high defensive stats. So what happened here to allow for rock type to see multiple usages in the top 30? Well, for one, the devastating move of Earthquake is no longer prevalent as it is in the other formats, which is one of rock's weaknesses after all. And 2, due to the nature of double battles, it is more likely to get hit by a super effective damage regardless of typing. So rock's defensive properties, although still bad, isn't as bad as it was for the singles format. But how does this lead to rock type performance in the VGC? Regulation Set I. In this tough and competitive format, the rock type sees a grand total of 1 appearance in the top 50.
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
With that sole Pokemon being Ogerpon Cornerstone form, due to its high offensive stats, unique rock move, and it not having a 4 times weakness. Glimmora just misses out on the top 50, but this is because the playstyle of using hazards in VGC is much less valuable since the battles are 4-on-4 rather than 6v6, which also leads to the reason why there are no rock types seen in this format, because let's keep it honest, are you really about to waste one of your 4 precious slots for a type that is covered with flaws when you can just easily choose someone better? Anyways, what do you guys think? Is there a possible way for this type to ever get recognized outside of any gimmicks or weather condition? Or has all its failures stockpiled too much for it to ever be seen as a usable type, leaving its offensive potential wasted, and remain the type unrefined by the numbers?